because everybody was excited about being able to, now for the first time, you could take all those skills that you've developed in the games industry and you could apply it to something that was maybe more fulfilling than just the creative endeavor, something that might actually help improve and save lives, but you don't have to compromise. Take your, sort of the basic skills that you would have as a given, and we're going to build on that to create really, really challenging gameplay to sort of capture the, 50 most difficult diagnoses or surgical scenarios or emergencies that you might encounter, literally that you might only encounter over 5 lifetimes of practice. From playing these games, they can renew their license, right? Because content in the games has been certified for AMA Category 1 CME credit.
Hey, what's up, you people? It's Johanna, aka Jojo. I have a really important and very exciting guest with me. Thanks for joining me, Sam.
Great to be here.
Great. Thank you very much, Sam. So, as CEO of LevelX, Sam Glassenberg leads a team of veteran game developers and designers who are pushing the limits of video games, graphics, physics, and design to train over 700,000 medical professionals. So before LevelX, Sam was the CEO of a leading independent game studio for Hollywood movies, releasing successful titles including The Hunger Games and Mission Impossible. And Sam began his career at LucasArts and spent several years at Microsoft, where he served as a leader of the DirectX Graphics team. So Sam also served on numerous industry advisory boards and speak internationally on video games in medicine. I'm so happy for you to be here. Thank you again for joining me. Is there anything that you would like to add to that introduction, Sam?
Oh, well, thank you for the introduction, Jojo. So I've, enjoyed a fun and exciting career in the video games business. And I guess I've worked in many roles in the industry. I started out when I was at LucasArts. I actually started out as an animator. I was hired as an artist. I've worked as an engineer, as a manager. I've worked, across multiple roles in the business, and now I'm a suit.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So I'm curious, tell me, what made you decide, with all the roles that you had, and what made you decide to focus on medical professionals utilizing and leveraging games?
Got it. So yes, my entry into the medical video games business was entirely by accident. Mm-hmm. So like I said, I spent my career making games, LucasArts, Microsoft. My last company did games for Hollywood movies. And all of this has basically made me the disgrace of the family because everyone in my family is doctors. Okay. My grandfather was a famous doctor, both of my parents, my wife, aunts, uncles. Everyone's doctors. And, I was the fool who never went to medical school. Mm-hmm. Back in 2012, my father, he's an anesthesiologist, and he basically gave up and he said, all right, Sam, you're too old. You're not going to medical school. So at least put all this games industry nonsense to good use. Make me a game to train my colleagues to do a fiber optic intubation. Difficult procedure. You only do it on rarely on difficult patients. He goes, just make me a game they can play on their phones. I don't want to have to drag anybody to a training center. So, I'm busy running a game company, but out of guilt, I sit down for 3 weekends, actually using Unity, back in 2012, it was a long time ago. And I threw together in 3 weekends this quick terrible little game that I uploaded to the App Store because this was before test flight. So, I didn't want to have to install it on his friends' iPhones one by one. Here's the link. They can download it themselves. Leave me alone. I didn't think about it again until 2 years later, he called me and he goes, hey, Sam, how many people downloaded the game? I go, I don't know, but I'll check for you. I went and I looked, and we had over 100,000 doctors, nurses, airway specialists worldwide who'd been playing this thing. At which point I Googled it because I had no idea any of this was going on. And I discovered, unbeknownst to me, they'd been running efficacy studies at medical schools and institutions all over the world that were showing that this terrible little game I threw together was actually improving physician performance. And so that was the moment where I was like, oh, this is interesting. Clearly there's demand for this sort of thing. What if instead of just making some terrible game that, I throw together in a few weekends, we actually put together a team of top developers, designers, artists from across the games industry, team them up with hundreds of physician advisors and contributors and actually make, real games that capture the challenges of the practice of medicine using, the game mechanics that we know and love.
So you were a precursor in that sense, in like utilizing, democratizing the gamification of healthcare and healthcare practices. And what was the response from the developers that you reach out to take part of this adventure?
So I was very surprised. One of the things that we often have to deal with is, historically, like there have been attempts at, using games for training or, the whole serious game genre. But, I think we all sort of have this view in our minds of what that ends up looking like.
Yeah.
Right. It looks like the graphics are always terrible. It looks like, Second Life out of the 1990s. They talk about it being games, but there's no real game mechanics there. Like there's a little bit of achievements and stuff, but nobody's really using, deep puzzle mechanics or shooter mechanics or, the physics mechanics that we actually use in real games. And so there was a lot of stigma associated with that because everyone just sort of assumes that that's what you're doing. But I think the second, people started actually seeing the demos and the games that we were building, they were like, oh, wait a minute. Hold on, you're using the latest engines. Like the graphics here are actually really good. You're using all the latest art tools, ZBrush and Substance. The game mechanics are actually quite deep and sophisticated. Like the second they realized that we weren't doing what everyone associates with sort of serious games, but instead we're actually making real games based on real game tech and real game design. That's when, we found that like the floodgates opened up because everybody was excited about being able to now for the first time, you could take all those skills that you've developed in the games industry and you could apply it to something that was maybe more fulfilling than just the creative endeavor, something that might actually help improve and save lives, but you don't have to compromise. Historically, if you wanted to do that, you had to compromise. You had to give up like, oh, good, I'm really excited about making games for good, but that means I'm going to have to make something that doesn't, that looks like a game I would have made 15 years ago. That trade-off has now gone away at LevelX. And we're up on stage at, at not just at major medical conferences, but we're on stage at GDC now. And we're on stage at SIGGRAPH up with, Unity and Unreal and NVIDIA, at competitions like Real Time Live and our, whatever our cool, real-time fluid system, for blood and boogers, right, is up there competing and winning awards. So we're being recognized not only for really pushing the cutting edge in healthcare training, but also in, pushing the cutting edge in game tech.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So tell me about, is there a difference between developing a game, a creative game, and developing a game for good, game for the medical sector?
Yes, it is obviously there are a lot of differences, but I think what's more surprising is the things that are the same. So LevelX is a studio, looks like any other game studio. We have a design department and an art department and an engineering department and a production team. And the only difference is we also have a medical team. On staff, we have a dedicated team of biomedical engineers and MDs in the studio that are working hand in hand with our artists and our engineers and our designers, right, to help fill in whatever gaps, to literally stand over the artist's shoulder, to make sure they have reference, like, oh, that should bleed more, that should be squishier, and really sort of help our designers and our artists really hone in on what are the greatest challenges of the practice of medicine. What's the kind of thing that gives a surgeon or a doctor, an adrenaline rush when they're in the operating room or in the clinic.
Wow. Okay, so that's great. So even in the term of publishing in the terms of investment? Do you see, I'm sure the VC, the background of the investors or the people that are asking for those games are different. I assume that, yeah.
Oh, in terms of our audience, or I mean, yes, I mean, doctors play games, right? They play doctors are people too, and so doctors play games. In fact, studies have shown that a surgeon who plays, a hand-eye coordination-based twitchy game, right, before going into surgery, even if that game has nothing to do with what they're actually doing in the operating room, their performance in the operating room will improve. So doctors do play games. When you're building games, that are specifically for physicians, right, this is very different from making like, surgeon simulator or something like that, right? Here, this is really about, we're not going to teach you how to become a doctor. We assume you already are one. And what we're going to do is take the most interesting, rare, challenging cases that you might encounter, take your, sort of the basic skills that you would have as a given, and we're going to build on that to create really, really challenging gameplay to sort of capture the, 50 most difficult diagnoses or surgical scenarios or emergencies that you might encounter, literally that you might only encounter over 5 lifetimes of practice.
Okay, so that's great. That's great. So with this in mind, can you tell us a little bit more about the successes that you had in that industry, in that field?
Sure. Well, I mean, we have, like, as you mentioned earlier, we have over 700,000 medical professionals playing our games. So literally they're, playing games, doing gastroenterology procedures, cardiology procedures, treating virtual patients across all these different specialties. Doctors are actually earning continuing medical education credit from playing these games. So literally, like, from playing these games, they can renew their license, right? Because content in the games has been certified for AMA Category 1 CME credit. We've won a multitude, as I mentioned, a multitude of awards across both medicine and video games and special effects. We're now partnered up with, dozens of medical device companies, life science companies, leading medical societies like American Heart Association, American Society of Anesthesiologists. We're actually working with a Translational Research Institute for Space Health. We actually have a project we're working on for NASA, where we're actually using all of this technology and game mechanics to help train astronauts for medical emergencies that may occur on deep space missions. Wow. So sort of across the company, one after another, we just keep finding more and more of these exciting applications of game technology and design that can come in and solve real problems in healthcare and in medical training that have just never been addressed before.
Wow. So really, games is the future. I can see that. So with this in mind, what are the challenges that the gaming industry will face and that you face today, or you think that you may face tomorrow?
Well, look, I mean, we could talk about the challenges of the video games industry for many hours. I can say for LevelX, the major challenges that we face is that there is no reference point. Often when you are going and making a game in the games industry, you have a lot of reference of things to do, how to market it, visual styles. There's a lot of similar things that have been done before, especially if you're working in an existing genre. You can look at all the other games in that genre for reference. In our case, nobody's done this before. Nobody's ever made real games for doctors. And so there is no reference point. Now we can use games as a reference, right? And we're utilizing, proven genres, everything from physics puzzles to strategy games to first-person shooters, but these have never been applied in medicine. And so figuring out the best way to do that is the quest and the challenge of LevelX, right? How do we go and use these things to advance the practice of medicine through play, to accelerate the adoption curve of new techniques and new approaches and new skills in medicine? It's never been done before. There's nothing to copy. We've got to figure this out as we go.
It's always great to be the first to do something, always. So in your opinion, has the global crisis improved or changed the gaming industry ecosystem and supported LevelX as well in their business?
I mean, look, in terms of the global crisis, I think games have, first off, done tremendous good for society. Because in a world where everybody's stuck at home and, unable to have real social connection, right? Games have created that opportunity so people can be entertained. They can actually do things with their friends. They can communicate and participate either competitively or collaboratively, and they can do so without spreading the virus. So I think that's something the games industry has done as a whole that's been really constructive and been a great contribution to society. Now, at LevelX specifically, we've gone ahead and utilized our technology and our platform and our know-how to solve specific problems related to COVID. So, when COVID first started, all of a sudden, a lot of the guidelines and best practices that physicians had been following for things like even how do you ventilate a patient? How do you put them on a ventilator? How do you intubate them? The best practices, the guidelines that existed needed to be changed for COVID patients. If you followed those guidelines, you could aerosolize a virus like COVID or potentially damage an airway of a COVID positive patient. And so we at LevelX had built a strategy game. We had a strategy game mechanic we had built, and we quickly updated it with the latest guidelines for how to manage an airway on a COVID positive patient. So it's literally, it's a strategy game like any other game you would play, except here you're going through a series of difficult patients that are presenting with COVID, but also, came in with a car accident, and you've got to secure their airway either for surgery or get them on a ventilator. And you can literally play through the guidelines, first off, the ones that came out of Italy, because they were the ones who were dealing with it first, and then eventually the updated guidelines here in the United States. So what we've been doing here is launching in our airway app, and our pulmonology app, and our cardiology app, all sorts of content to help frontline medical professionals prepare for the onslaught of COVID patients and COVID scenarios that they had never seen before. And so this is an area, where we invested and, have been able to, see great success and great feedback from doctors. Overall, for the industry as a whole, I think one thing that we've benefited is we've all learned the degree to which we can, we've overcome a lot of our anxiety about remote work. And so I'm excited about a games industry of the future where, people can work. I mean, LevelX now has people working, all over the country, very excited about, being able to have, more talent working on better games because they're not limited by geography.
But talking about more talent and looking for talent, are you looking for talent? Are you expanding with the success that
I think if you looked at our website, we have something like 20 open positions. So we're actively hiring experienced game designers, 2D and 3D artists and UI artists and UX designers and QA and engineers across a wide range of disciplines, graphics and physics and front end and back end networking. So across the board, technical art, animation, 3D modeling. We're hiring across the gamut. So if any of your viewers are interested, go take a look at levelx.com and look at our jobs page and please apply.
Sure. So I know that it's remote work at the moment. Are all the talent that you're looking for will have to be in the US, or are you looking to expand in other countries? Or?
So we were actually recently acquired by BrainLab, which is an international health tech company. And so at LevelX, we're now, starting to explore bringing on, members of the team who maybe aren't even located in the United States. Okay. So the company's headquartered in Chicago, but we now have, large numbers of employees on the East Coast, in New York, in Seattle, and other places. And we are starting to explore in certain areas having folks work potentially outside the country, either on a contract basis or otherwise.
Sure. Thank you very much, Sam, for that. So any last word of advice for anyone looking to be part of the gaming industry today and part of LevelX, actually?
Sure. So look, the advice that I would give to somebody excited about LevelX or anywhere in the games industry is probably going to be similar, which is, we live in a world today where all of the tools, Unity included, are available at your fingertips, right? To learn how to create great games and to practice creating great games. You no longer need, to have a special NDA and developer license and a dev kit to some esoteric piece of hardware in order to start creating games. All the tools that you need to do 3D modeling and animation and design and engineering are all available for free. So, and as well as all the learning, the learning resources that are available. So, we live in a world, it's much easier to start exploring game development today than it ever was. And really, what makes a difference is that also means that a lot of people are doing it. And so what really makes the difference for us is, track record and portfolio. So, it's not just about desire, it's about jumping onto these tools and really practicing and honing your skills. And whether you're an engineer or an artist or a designer, just creating that amazing, unique portfolio that, really demonstrates, skills in key areas. There's nothing preventing you from creating something, besides your own creativity, and creating something that can really blow away a potential hiring manager at, LevelX or any other game studio.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for your last word. And thank you for your time today. Viewers, all the social channel for Sam and LevelX, the website will be in the description box. Sam, thank you again for your time and have a great day.
Thank you, Joanna. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.